My name is Ricardo. I'm 33 years old. I have a small family with my wife and our 5-year-old daughter. We're from El Salvador and immigrated to the United States in 2022. To get to where we are today, we went through an incredibly difficult time. We worked grueling shifts, sometimes over 12 hours a day, and saved every penny. Our dream was to own a spacious home in Toledo, Ohio. Finally, in early 2026, that dream came true. I still remember the exact moment we got the keys. My wife and I stood in the middle of the living room, looked at each other, and burst into tears. Our daughter was so excited that she ran all over the house to explore every corner. This house was larger than anywhere we had ever lived. It had a backyard and even a small pool. Best of all, the neighborhood was extremely quiet and the neighbors were real friendly. For the first 2 months, everything was perfect. But then, something happened last week that changed everything. That evening started out like any other. A little after 9 o'clock, my wife and daughter were watching TV in the living room when I did a final walkthrough to check the door locks before bed. Just as I touched the handle of the back door, a loud thud came from outside, making me jump. I cracked the door open to see what it was, but a massive force slammed into it. The door flew open and hit me hard in the face. 4 men dressed in all black and wearing full face masks rushed inside. I didn't have a single second to react before they held me at gunpoint. One of them grabbed me by the collar and dragged me into the living room. My wife stood up in a panic and pulled our daughter close to her. I was shoved down onto the floor near them. "Sit down, everyone sit down right now," the man who was holding me ordered. He pointed his gun at us while the others began to fan out through the house. They started ransacking everything, tossing furniture and emptying drawers. But something was very strange. They didn't take anything of value. My wife's laptop was sitting right on the table, but they didn't touch it. My wallet had fallen on the floor, but they walked right past it without even looking. I realized then that they weren't there for money. They were looking for something specific. When they couldn't find what they wanted, they became frustrated and aggressive. They didn't just search, they started smashing things. Finally, they dragged me over to the kitchen counter and shoved me into the corner. At that point, my daughter couldn't hold it back anymore and began to sob. The biggest man of the group got right in my face. He glared at me and growled every word. "Where is it? Where are you hiding it?" I racked my brain, trying to figure out what he was talking about. I was completely stunned. I answered with the only truth I knew. "I don't know what you're talking about." Wham! The first blow landed right in my stomach, making my body fold in half. The second hit me in the back. I collapsed onto the kitchen floor. I looked over at my wife and daughter. They were trembling while another man stood over them. The man repeated the question. I gave him the same answer because it was the truth. So they hit me again. This happened over and over until I couldn't stand up. I had to lean against the kitchen cabinets just to breathe. The big guy nodded to the man guarding my family. He understood the signal, pulled out a knife, and started walking toward my wife. She quickly covered our daughter's eyes. My eyes went wide. I felt a surge of pure rage and tried to lunge at them, but the big man pinned me to the floor. "I'm asking you one last time, where are you hiding it?" he hissed. I looked at the blade held near my wife's neck. Tears streamed down my face. "I swear to God, I don't know anything. You have the wrong people." The big man let out a roar of frustration at my answer. Just as he was about to do something terrible, one of the men who had been searching the house ran back in. He was holding my framed family photo. The big man stopped. He stared at the photo, then at me, and then he looked around the house. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The 4 men huddled together and whispered. They kept looking back and forth between the photo and my bruised face. They looked at each other as if they had just realized something very important. The big man gave a signal, and all of them walked out of the house. They were incredibly calm as they left. As soon as the back door closed, my wife and daughter ran to me. We held each other tight and cried, paralyzed by fear. Once we calmed down, we called the police. They processed the scene, took photos, and listened to our story. Eventually, an officer explained that this was likely a home invasion at the wrong address. They believed the men were targeting the previous owner or someone who used to rent the house. The police are still investigating, but there have been no leads. The other houses in the neighborhood were hit. We cleaned up the house, changed the locks, and installed a security system. But our lives are completely upside down. My wife has become very quiet, and my daughter is afraid of everything. As for me, I started sleeping with a gun in my nightstand drawer. We can't move because all our savings went into this house. We have no other choice but to stay. Nothing else has happened since that night, but the peace of our home is gone. We know it will take a very long time before we ever feel safe again.
I work as a manager for a branch of a major supermarket chain on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. That night started out like any other workday. I clocked out quite late because I had to cover for an employee who called out at the last minute, so it had been an incredibly busy shift. By the time I left the store, I was exhausted. I had to drive about 30 minutes on a stretch of I-10 to get back home. My body had hit its absolute limit. My mind was starting to go blank, and my eyelids felt as heavy as lead. I kept telling myself, just a little further. Once I get past this curve, I'll be fine. I remember allowing myself to blink just once, very quickly, to soothe the dry, burning sensation in my eyes. But that blink turned into an abyss. I fell fast asleep behind the wheel while the car was still barreling down the highway at high speed. As I was fading into the darkness of unconsciousness, a voice suddenly rang out. It was clear, commanding, and right in my ear, as if an uninvited passenger were sitting right there in the shotgun seat.
Tubby, watch out!
I bolted upright, my heart nearly jumping out of my chest. Driven by pure survival instinct, I gripped the steering wheel and jerked it hard to the left. The tires screeched painfully against the asphalt. The car swayed and tilted to one side, the wheels grazing a concrete marker. I was only a split second away from a head-on collision that would have crushed both the car and me. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder. My entire body was shaking, and I broke out in a cold sweat despite the chilly January air. I looked at the seat next to me. It was empty. I looked out the window, but there was only the dark, silent road and not a soul in sight. No one was anywhere near enough to shout a warning like that. After regaining a bit of composure, I continued driving in a state of extreme alertness. My sleepiness had vanished completely, replaced by a deep sense of confusion. I pulled into a small roadside diner to have a cup of coffee and warm up. As I sipped the hot coffee, my body began to calm down, but my mind couldn't let go of that near-death moment. And then, a chill ran down my spine as I realized a strange truth. That voice had called me Tubby. That isn't my name. In this entire world, there was only one person who ever called me by that nickname. Joyce, my best friend since childhood. We had been inseparable since high school. Back then, I was pretty chubby and an easy target for teasing. Joyce was the first one to call me Tubby, but he never meant it as an insult. The way he said it always had a hint of humor that made me feel okay about it. After I lost weight later in life, no one else knew that name. It had been a very long time since we had seen each other because Joyce was serving at a military base all the way in Texas. I absent-mindedly flipped through a morning newspaper that the waitress had just placed on the table, my hand still trembling as I held my coffee cup. Right there on the front page, a headline caught my eye and left me completely frozen. The report was about a horrific military training accident at a naval air station in Texas. I looked down at the list of the fallen soldiers. Joyce's name was right there. The shock left me sitting in silence, and everything around me turned into a blur. I read all the personal information attached to the name very slowly, repeating it several times. It was Joyce. It was definitely him. I checked the time of the accident. Joyce had passed away just a few hours before I heard that voice save my life on the highway. I tried to find a logical explanation, that it was just a hallucination from exhaustion, or my brain's way of protecting me, but no theory felt convincing enough. I sat in that diner for a long time. I remembered Joyce's face, his voice, and the way he used to call me Tubby. I thought about all the good memories we shared. The next day, I drove to Joyce's home. His funeral was being held. I couldn't hold back my tears, and I still couldn't fully accept that my friend was gone, even as I stood before his casket. It has been nearly 10 years now, and I still remember every detail of that day. There are things in life that cannot be explained. You just have to accept that they really happened. In the most dangerous moment of my life, that old friend appeared in some form to save me. Since that night, every time I drive on a lonely highway, I never let myself become distracted or tired again.
I used to be a criminal detective, familiar with chasing criminals through the dusty streets of New York. But now, I sit in a small room, my ears filled with urgent calls through the 911 dispatch center. This is a punishment, or at least that's what my superiors call it. I made a mistake, a hasty arrest, and acting alone led to a case that wasn't fully solved. They sent me here to learn how to listen. 911, how can I help you? I pick up the phone, my voice monotonous after hours of non-stop calls. On the other end, a woman's voice hesitates. Hello, I just wanted to talk for a moment. Are you okay? I furrowed my brows. This is an emergency line, ma'am. Are you in trouble? No. I just want to know if you're okay, she says, laughing in a way that sounds out of place, as if trapped between a joke and panic. I glance at the clock. Only a few minutes left until my shift ends. I sigh. Ma'am, if this is not an emergency, I'll have to. A man's voice suddenly cuts in, commanding, Get in the car, quickly. I freeze. Are you in danger? Please answer yes or no. She chuckles as if I've said something absurd. Maybe yes. I sensed something was wrong. Tell me your location. Do you see any street signs, shops, or anything? There's a moment of silence, only the sound of wind through the phone. Then, she whispers, barely audible, as though afraid someone might hear. I don't know. If I get in the car, then I will. My heart races. Stay on the line. I signal to my colleague next to me, quickly redirecting the call to the patrol team. The man's voice returns, urgent and commanding. I grip the phone tightly, picturing the woman in my mind. We're sending people. Don't let them suspect. She doesn't answer, but I hear the man shout, followed by the sound of a car door slamming. The call disconnects. Soon after, I receive a message from an anonymous number. Thank you for doing your role well tonight. I freeze, realizing I've been played. They didn't just disrupt the system, they led me into a trap. As I'm processing this, my colleague Jake rushes in, informing me of a kidnapping in the East City Park. A group of criminals took a child, and the patrol team was misdirected due to a fake signal. I dig through the call data and find out the group had hacked into the system, redirecting their calls to my 911 center. Step by step, I realized they had been watching me for a long time, carefully preparing to exploit any weaknesses. Just as my mind swirls with information and emotions, I get a call on my personal cell. Head west to the forest, 10 miles, to the abandoned house. Go alone, remember. It's the woman's voice from before, and the phone disconnects before I can respond. Jake asks if I'm okay, and I tell him to monitor the information. I'll request support if needed. I drive 20 minutes to the location they gave me, my mind on fire. Upon entering the abandoned house, I realize this isn't just a hideout. It's a hub for illegal transactions. Hidden cameras are mounted at corners, the doors are reinforced, and a small control panel with modern electronics sits in the middle of the room. The sound of footsteps from upstairs makes me stop. Instinctively, I move slowly toward the living room. There, a woman sits in a chair with a small gun in hand. She must be the one who called me. A sense of unease starts to creep in. Where are the rest of her gang? I glance at the screen on the control panel. The security camera feed shows clearly. 2 of her associates are upstairs, seemingly busy ransacking the place or preparing to escape. One is standing near a window, holding a phone, likely in contact with someone. My gut tells me there's not much time left. They'll quickly realize I'm here and find a way to stop me, even destroy me. In a sudden move, I throw the flashlight at the woman, distracting her. I rush forward, disarming her before she can open fire. From upstairs, the sound of hurried footsteps comes down. I hear a man's angry voice. "What's going on?" I drag the woman toward the door, using her as a shield as the 2 other men charge down the stairs. They freeze when they see her subdued. "You won't get away," one of them roars, but I hear the sound of police sirens in the distance. They point their guns at me and fire repeatedly, regardless of their own safety. In their frantic, reckless gaze, only selfishness and anger remain. I quickly pull the woman under the table to shield from the gunfire, but I'm too slow. One bullet hits her in the stomach, and her painful scream echoes. Immediately after, another bullet pierces my arm, the sharp pain spreading, making my whole arm go numb. The SWAT team rushes in, arresting the entire group. The sound of the child crying fills the air. I freeze, a familiar sensation coursing through me. "Vincent!" I call out my son's name involuntarily. The child cries while calling for his father, and my heart tightens as the door is broken open, revealing my son tied up in the corner of the room. After the case is concluded, I spend the whole night reviewing what happened. A sense of unease creeps in as I look at the files and equipment retrieved from the abandoned house. Among them is a list of names, addresses, and detailed financial information. Each line of text clearly appears under the desk lamp's light, and one name stands out: the leader of the human trafficking ring I had dismantled 5 years ago. Turning through other documents, I see scrawled notes describing a detailed plan. They had been watching me for a long time, recording my habits, work, and even my family. Red circles on a map of New York City mark areas where they once had operations. At the bottom of the stack, an old, slightly blurred photo shows a dark room with victims bound. I recognize it as the warehouse where they used to hide people before I took down their network all those years ago. When checking the hard drive of the computer, I find short video clips. One of them shows me working at the 911 dispatch center, secretly filmed from a distance. Another video records my family at a park. Details slowly reveal the full picture. They are remnants of the case I once handled. The woman, Marlene, is the mastermind who took over after her late husband's death. He had been taken down by me when the investigation team discovered him. This plan not only aims to continue their illegal activities, but is also a way to get revenge on me. They want me to experience fear and helplessness, just like what they felt when their whole network was destroyed years ago. Even though the case is over, the haunting never lets go. The images in the files, the woman's eyes as she was restrained, and the child's screams still echo in my head every night. I propose the formation of an in-depth investigation team focused on tracking down the remaining members of the organization. Though I know this fight won't be easy, I feel a stronger resolve than ever. I must end this threat once and for all. My name's Karen, and I'm a senior studying sociology. After school, I usually babysit to help cover my living expenses. Mary, a single mom, hired me and paid pretty well. Her place is a cozy 2-story house out in the Boston suburbs. Inside, it's got that warm, homey vibe, family pictures on the walls, little toys scattered all over the living room, and a faint smell of oak from the fireplace. Ellie, 5 years old with blonde hair and bright blue eyes, was zipping around the room, her giggles making the freezing winter outside feel far away. At 10, I told Ellie a bedtime story before she drifted off. Her mom, Mary, got home right on time, like always. She gave me a kind smile, said thanks, and waved as I headed out. Back at my apartment, I suddenly realized I had left my textbook on Mary's couch. With a big paper due soon, I couldn't just leave it behind, so I decided to go back, even though it was already pretty late. The street looked totally different at that moment. It was dead quiet. The streetlights flickered on and off, and the tree shadows swayed in the dim glow, making everything feel even creepier. I stopped in front of the Parkers' house. The lights were off inside, except for a faint glow from a nightlight upstairs. As soon as I stepped in, I knew something was off. The air felt colder than usual, heavy and still, so quiet I could hear my own footsteps on the wooden floor. Near the door, melted snow and muddy footprints were smeared across the carpet, probably from Mary's boots. Just as I turned around with my book in hand, I caught a glimpse of a figure moving past the second-floor window. My heart started racing, my fingers tightening around the book like it could somehow protect me. Back in the car, my phone lit up with a call from Mary's number. Her voice was shaky and weak. "Karen, are you still here?" I quickly told her I'd just come back to grab my book. "You shouldn't have come in." The line suddenly cut out. Mary's voice was barely a whisper before the call dropped. I sat frozen in the car, my stomach twisting with worry for Ellie. I decided to call the police. While waiting for them to show up, I stepped out, scanning the windows. Footprints in the snow led straight from the backyard to Ellie's window. The police got there fast, moving in toward the house. Through the dim glow from Ellie's room, I could see him, a tall guy holding a rifle, creeping from corner to corner. Mary was tied to a chair, her mouth gagged. Ellie sat on her mom's lap, her face red and puffy from crying, tiny hands clinging to Mary's neck. I had to look away when I saw their terrified eyes. The police surrounded the house. A SWAT team geared up and moved toward the back door, while the team leader got on a loudspeaker, stalling for time. The guy inside didn't waste any time. He shouted his demands: car, cash, a clean getaway. If they didn't give him what he wanted, he'd start with Ellie first. I gasped, my mind spinning. My heart nearly stopped when I saw him yank Ellie away from Mary, the gun aimed right at her. Inside, Mary was signaling with her hands. The guy wasn't paying attention then. Out of nowhere, Mary launched herself forward, shoving the chair at him. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to throw him off balance. He spun around, gun now pointed straight at Mary. A loud bang, a flash of light. Mary's scream cut through the night, sending a chill through everyone. I shouted in the patrol car, "They need help. Please, do something." Then all hell broke loose. The SWAT team stormed in, smashing through the ground floor window, bursting through the back door, tossing flashbang into the living room. Gunshots rang out, screams, Ellie's wails cutting through the chaos. The guy stumbled through the smoke, clutching Ellie tight, yanking her in front of him like a human shield. He was yelling non-stop, gunfire erupting wildly, bullets flying in every direction. Then a bullet hit his hand. His grip loosened. The gun clattered to the floor. An officer rushed in, tackled him to the ground, and cuffed him while another officer carried Ellie out. I ran over, nearly tripping as I grabbed Ellie and pulled her into my arms. She was sobbing, her little cries cutting through the silence now that everything was over. At the police station, I sat next to Mary while they patched her up before taking her to the hospital. Ellie wouldn't let go of me, clinging to my arm, still crying. The guy didn't look scared at all. If anything, his expression sent a chill down my spine. He smirked, eyes full of mockery as he stared at Mary and her mom through the glass partition. After hours of questioning and investigation, the truth finally came out. Turns out, he used to work for the company that maintained the Parkers family security system. He'd been watching them for months. That wasn't his first time pulling off a robbery like this. He even admitted he regretted not being more careful, said he should have taken me too. Mary's call was him forcing her to stage a fake scene, hoping it'd keep her and Ellie safe. A chill ran down my spine when I realized just how close I'd been to pure evil. What if I hadn't come back that night? Mary had to have surgery and would need weeks to recover. I stayed at the Parker's house to help take care of Ellie, but things weren't the same anymore. Ellie jumped at every loud noise. Every night she needed me or Mary beside her just to fall asleep. I couldn't shake the memories either. Mary getting shot, Ellie's cries, the cold, empty look in that guy's eyes. It all kept replaying in my head. I tried to push it away, but some nights I'd jolt awake from nightmares. One day, as light snow started falling, I stood by the window, watching the flakes drift down. Ellie came over and tugged my hand. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, really smiled. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. But I knew the truth. Neither of us would ever forget that night. It was a reminder that even in the safest places, danger can be lurking. And sometimes, it's the tiniest gut feelings that end up saving the things that matter most. I still clearly remember that day, a fall afternoon in the suburbs of Minnesota. The dry leaves scattered across the path leading to Mark's house, each step seeming to disturb the stillness of the air. The chill in the air carried the smell of earth and rotting wood, drifting on the wind. I pulled my coat tighter around me, feeling the wind slip through the collar, bringing a vague but uncomfortable sensation. Mark's house appeared before me, an old 2-story wooden house, deeply reminiscent of 1970s America. The swing on the porch creaked in the wind, the peeling paint revealing the dark wood underneath. Every detail evoked a nostalgic yet slightly eerie feeling. Mark and I had many memories tied to this house. When we were kids, we would play in the garden or in the basement. "I want you to help clean the basement. I think we might find some interesting stuff from when we were kids," Mark said. Those words sparked my curiosity because the basement had been the place we used to hide for hours, telling ghost stories and daring each other to walk through the darkness. But it had been a long time since any of us dared to mention it. We stood before the door leading to the basement. Mark's hand gripped the flashlight tightly, his eyes constantly scanning, as if he feared someone was watching. "That's the devil's domain," Mark said with a light laugh. But seeing the worried look on Mark's face, I knew the basement wasn't just a messy place. The wooden stairs creaked with every step. The flashlight's beams swept across the walls covered in cobwebs, revealing stains and patches of mildew. A musty smell filled the air, mixed with a foul stench, as if something was decaying. I held tightly to the railing, trying not to look down. The weak light from Mark's flashlight swept across a corner of the room, where a large wooden box was hidden in the shadows. The old box, its paint chipped away, looked as if it had been there for decades. Mark bent down, his hands trembling as he opened the box. A putrid, rotting smell wafted up, causing me to step back, my hand covering my mouth. In the dim light, I saw what was inside: animal carcasses, cats, mice, birds, stuffed into the box. Some were intact, but most had decayed, their fur matted together, and a dark brown, slimy liquid spilling from the sides of the box. My heart pounded, and a wave of nausea rose within me. Mark stood frozen, the flashlight in his hand flickering as if he too couldn't control it. "Isaiah," he whispered hoarsely, almost as if in disbelief. Isaiah, the 17-year-old boy, with a cold face and empty eyes. He always kept his distance from everyone, lost in his own world. Mark told me that Isaiah liked to collect things that others threw away, old toys, bottle caps, and sometimes even stranger things. But this wasn't a hobby. This was something else. Mark confessed to me that he had once seen Isaiah kill a bird in his yard a few months ago. "I thought it was just a stupid prank," Mark said, his voice breaking. "But now, I'm not so sure." Mark's parents decided to send Isaiah for psychological treatment after finding strange drawings in his room, images of torn-up animals, twisted faces full of rage. I remember Isaiah's cold, challenging stare when he was taken away, as though he could see right through us. A month later, Mark called me. Isaiah had escaped from the treatment center. The police were notified, but every search attempt had been in vain. Soon after, strange things began happening in the area. Animals went missing, and their bodies were found in a state of brutal torture. The news spread throughout the town, but no one dared to speak Isaiah's name. One late evening, while driving past Mark's house, I saw a figure standing by the second-floor window. My heart stopped. It couldn't be Mark, and clearly, it was no one else but Isaiah. That night, I dreamed of Isaiah. He was standing at the foot of my bed, his deep eyes and cold smile on his lips. "Are you scared?" His voice echoed in my head. I shot up, my back drenched in sweat. Since then, I've never stopped feeling like I'm being watched. One evening, as I was heading home, I saw muddy footprints right in front of my living room window. I didn't dare to investigate further. Isaiah was still missing, and no one knew where he was. But I knew one day I'd see his name on the news, tied to a horrific crime. I worked the night shift at a Subway, a small shop next to a gas station where people stopped in a hurry on their way home. The smell of toasted bread, fresh vegetables, and deli meats mixed with the familiar greasy air of the kitchen. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling emitted a cold, harsh glow, reflecting off the glass counter full of bacon and sliced cheese. He started showing up about 2 weeks ago, a middle-aged man wearing a wrinkled shirt, his brown hair thin and greasy. He didn't cause trouble, just ordered a regular beef sandwich with extra mayonnaise. But what bothered me was his gaze. Every time I stood behind the counter, he stared at me. Not the casual glance of a customer, but a persistent, probing look. When I wrapped the sandwich, he asked me what my name was. When he paid, his hand lingered on mine longer than necessary. The next time he came back, still with that look. This time he complimented me, saying I was pretty. He asked if I wanted to go out after work. I smiled politely and declined. But he didn't stop. One night he called the shop, his voice deep and raspy. "Is this Glenda?" I froze. He knew my name. He asked where I lived. I hung up. I told my manager, but there wasn't much to be done about it. "Just a weird customer, don't worry." After that, he disappeared. I felt relieved, but that feeling didn't last long. One Friday night, I finished my shift at 11 p.m. It was colder than usual. The subway glass door reflected my pale face under the dim lights of the parking lot. I took off my apron, adjusted my messy hair before stepping outside. My brother, Mason, always told me to be more careful. He didn't like me working the night shift alone. "Guys like him could be following you, Glenda. If anything happens, call me." Mason had picked me up many times, especially after I told him about the creepy customer. He didn't like the way I shrugged it off when I talked about him, but I always thought Mason was overreacting. That night, I told Mason I could go home on my own, but just 10 minutes later, I wished I had listened to him. Near the exit, a figure stood under a streetlight. I froze. The person was dressed as a clown. A large, baggy red and white striped suit, a curly wig, and a face painted white with a bright red smile stretched unnaturally wide. The clown held out a red balloon to me, swaying lightly in the wind. I didn't move, not knowing how to react. The clown said nothing, just brought the balloon closer. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my chest. This had to be a joke, right? Someone hired a clown to mess with me? I reached out slowly, took the balloon. As soon as I grabbed it, he turned and walked away, quickly disappearing into the darkness. The balloon felt different, like it was heavier. I didn't think much of it, turning back toward my car. Suddenly, there was a loud pop. I jumped, the string of the balloon slipping from my hand. In an instant, a puff of white smoke shot out from the torn balloon, swirling into a thick cloud right in front of me. I gasped in shock, and immediately, the sharp chemical scent hit my nose, making my throat burn and tighten. A pungent odor overwhelmed all my senses, causing my stomach to twist. The more I coughed, the more white dust filled my mouth, my lungs. I staggered, my legs losing strength, and everything in front of me blurred. My throat felt dry. My heart pounded uncontrollably, out of rhythm. My ears rang, and all I could hear was the sound of my own labored breathing, desperate, as if I were drowning. Heavy footsteps pounded behind me. Darkness rushed toward me. He pressed on me. I heard his heavy breathing right next to my ear. I've been waiting a long time for this, Glenda. I struggled, but my limbs were weak. A loud yell rang out. Footsteps rushed forward, and his body was yanked away from me. I blinked, trying to regain my senses. Mason, my brother, stood there, his fists clenched, breathing heavily. The man crawled to his feet, but Mason was quicker. Another punch, this time harder, enough to knock him to the ground. He cursed and groaned, holding his face. The police arrived, and when the lights flashed on his face, I saw him clearly. The white paint on his face had smeared from sweat, revealing pale skin and greasy brown hair. It was none other than the regular customer at Subway. I froze. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized the truth. He had always been there, watching me, waiting. I saw Mason say something to the police, but my ears were ringing. He was arrested on the spot, and Mason took me to the hospital. After that, I quit my job at Subway. I still thought about him, regretting not listening to Mason. I wondered how long he'd been planning this. How many days had he been watching me? If Mason hadn't shown up, what would have happened? I remembered his face when he handed me the red balloon. It was the smile of someone who knew he was about to get exactly what he wanted. The traffic light turned green. I drove off, trying not to think about what had just happened. By chance, I glanced at the back seat through the rearview mirror, and there it was a red balloon, lying there, rolling on the seat. I don't know when it got there. I worked as a package sorter at the FedEx distribution center in Schertz, Texas for 4 years. That night, the rain had been pouring for 79 continuous hours. The city of Austin, just a few dozen miles away from where I was on high alert. 2 bomb blasts had killed 2 people. The first one cleverly disguised as a package. My shift manager, Jason, directed me to the D3 area, the conveyor belt where packages from Austin were processed. This section usually only received a few returns each night, but tonight, the conveyor was almost blocked, flooded with packages from the city in panic. Most of them had returned to sender, or address not found stamps hastily applied. And then, I touched it. A brown cardboard box, no postage, no barcode, no return label. Just a carefully handwritten church address. I picked it up. It was far too heavy for its size. Then I smelled it. The metallic engine oil-like smell. But there was something else, a sour, nauseating scent that made me gag. I turned the package in my hands, and my heart sank when I saw a small crack in the corner. Behind the cardboard, a red wire peeked out. In that moment, I could hear nothing except my own heartbeat. The hum of machines, the chatter of employees, everything disappeared. It was just me, the box in my hands, and one thought in my mind. Oh God, is this a bomb? Carl, he didn't need to ask. He just glanced at the package and nodded. We understood each other without saying a word. In seconds, the evacuation protocol was activated. 83 people evacuated the warehouse, quickly, but without panic. I stayed frozen, holding the box, sweat pouring down my forehead. If I set it down wrong, if some mechanism inside activated from the impact. I stood there, not daring to move. The box was still in my hands. The bomb squad was on their way. I had 9 minutes to keep it still. The rain continued to fall outside. The warehouse was now nearly empty. Everyone had been evacuated. It was just me, Carl, and a few senior staff members standing far off, watching, waiting. No one dared approach. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but with each passing second, my hands shook more. My wrist ached from being held in place for so long. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my head. 8 minutes. I thought about my wife and daughter. She always told me to be careful. "You're just sorting packages, what danger is there?" I used to think. But now, standing between life and death, I realize there's no job that's truly safe. My daughter always thought her dad was Superman, the strongest man in the world. 7 minutes. What if I don't make it back? I felt my chest tighten. I didn't want to die. 6 minutes. My fingers went numb and I accidentally slipped one. The box wobbled slightly. Inside, something shifted with inertia. Sweat poured down my face, rolling down my cheeks. I squeezed the box tightly, took a shaky breath, not daring to exhale too forcefully. Carl shouted from afar, "Hold still! Don't move!" 5 minutes. Every nerve in my body seemed ready to snap. I shut my eyes, trying to push the fear away. I thought of my wife and daughter's smiles when they greeted me at home. 4 minutes. I can't die here. I gritted my teeth, clutched the package tightly, trying to keep it absolutely still. 3 minutes. I felt my legs shaking, but I stayed firm. 2 minutes, then 1. The sound of sirens blared. The bomb squad had arrived. They rushed in, instructing me to slowly place the package down. I could barely feel my fingers anymore. I let go. Inch by inch, there was no explosion. One of the bomb technicians performed a sweep with a detection device. He froze for a few seconds, then turned back to look at me with a horrified expression. The tilt switch was triggered, but for some reason it didn't explode. I collapsed, my body going limp, drained of all strength, but I was still alive. The next day, I sat in an office at the FBI headquarters in San Antonio, listening to the analysis of the bomb I had discovered. "You're very lucky," Agent Gomez said. "Just one small technical error, a loose wire, had kept me alive. We traced the package you found. The church address was just a decoy, but through security cameras we identified a person who dropped the package off at a public post office." Gomez placed a photo in front of me. A young man, average build, wearing a gray hoodie, head bowed to avoid the camera. Though the image was unclear, there was one detail that agents couldn't ignore. He was driving a red Ford Ranger, the same vehicle seen near all the previous bombing sites. We traced his vehicle registration numbers and analyzed his purchase history for bomb-making materials from local stores. That's when the name Mark Anthony Condit came up. We followed him for 36 hours. When he realized we had identified him, he fled. By the time he reached Interstate 35, the police surrounded his vehicle, but instead of surrendering, he detonated a bomb in his car. Then, he opened another file. A list of targets, organized by priority. The first target, First Baptist Church, the address on the package. The second target, 1429 Oakwood Lane. I felt my body freeze as my eyes lingered on the second address, 1429 Oakwood Lane. That was my home. My palms tightened so much that my nails nearly dug into my skin. The entire room seemed to fade away. Agent Gomez's voice became muffled, but I could no longer hear him clearly. Everything blurred. Only one thought remained. If I hadn't noticed that package that day, if I hadn't paid attention to that strange smell. On my way home, I watched the streetlights blur past the car window, my body still trembling. I would never tell my wife and daughter about this. They shouldn't live with the fear I just experienced. From now on, every time I handle a package, I'll check it more carefully. Every time I hear a strange sound, I'll be more alert. And every time I get home, I'll hug my wife and daughter a little longer, as if I were granted another life, one I almost lost. The first day I wore the powder pink Lolita dress, I felt like I was suffocating. The collar tightened around my skin, my breathing became labored. That was when I was 6 years old, when my mother decided to turn me into a living doll. "Venus, you're so beautiful. You were born to do this," Mom whispered, her eyes gleaming strangely as she pulled me into the newly bought pleated dress after watching a Japanese movie. I didn't know. That day was the first step into an invisible cage. Our small house was isolated on the outskirts of El Paso, Texas. Scary quiet during the day, but at night, it woke up with the never-ending studio lights. My skin prickled under the scorching lights, sweat dripped down my spine, but I wasn't allowed to wipe it away. My bedroom wasn't a place to rest. The bed was in the middle of the room, surrounded by hundreds of dolls, my sisters, with their lifeless glass eyes always watching my every move. Sometimes late at night, I saw them inch a little closer, and I would wake up with a choked scream in my throat. When I was 9, the YouTube channel Venus the Living Doll reached 1 million subscribers. Every week, millions of people followed my fairy tale life. They didn't know that behind that sweet smile were hours of exhausting practice, thick layers of makeup, and a stomach growling with hunger from the strict diet. Smile more. Mom gestured from behind the camera, her eyes glued to the phone screen, where comments and likes poured in endlessly. I wondered if the viewers realized I was still a human being with thoughts and feelings, or if they really thought I was just a doll. At 15, Mom decided I needed gastric sleeve surgery. "It's the only way to maintain your figure," she said as we sat in the private clinic of a doctor in Houston. "The girl is already underweight," the doctor told Mom, his voice full of concern. But Mom found another doctor, less ethical, willing to perform the surgery for a large enough sum. I remember begging, but I couldn't change Mom's decision. After the surgery, my body became so thin that my ribs were visible through my thin skin. My hair fell out in large clumps. Every tiny bite of food became a battle. My stomach cramped painfully, my body refusing to digest. Thinner, more perfect, Venus. Mom's voice was like a ghostly chorus in my head. One night, I fainted in the bathroom. Mom temporarily stopped filming videos due to Venus's poor health. But in reality, she didn't want her fans to see her failed product, a doll falling apart. For the first time in years, I was alone, without cameras, without glaring lights. My health deteriorated rapidly. Mom was worried, but refused to take me to the hospital for fear of being discovered about the illegal surgery. One night, I caught Mom sitting alone in the dark, her hand scrolling through old comments on our videos. "They loved her. They never loved me like that," Mom whispered to herself, a tear rolling down her cheek. I stood silently in the darkness, a strange feeling rising in my chest. Mom was just another puppet, controlled by the craving for love and recognition she had never received. I found an opportunity in the private messages on Instagram. A fan named Akira, a Japanese native living in Dallas, kept sending messages expressing concern about my health. "I can help you. I know you're being held captive." At first, I didn't dare to reply. But when I found Mom lying unconscious on the living room floor with an empty vodka bottle beside her, I knew this was my only chance. My hands trembling, I took Mom's phone and sent a message to Akira. "Help me." Akira picked me up at the end of the road on a rainy night. With only a small backpack containing a few rare normal clothes and my passport, I left the house that had imprisoned me for 10 years. In a strange city, without friends, without family, no one recognized me on the street. But freedom was just an illusion. Every day, I found myself standing in front of the mirror for hours, wondering if Venus had truly disappeared. I caught myself buying Lolita dresses, holding them up to my body, feeling the familiar fabric. There were nights I woke up and found myself putting on makeup in front of the mirror. 3 months after escaping, I received a call from Texas. A strange voice on the other end identified himself as a detective from the El Paso Police Department. We found a mummified body in the master bedroom. According to DNA results, it's Venus, your daughter, Ms. Margaret. My head spun. No, you're wrong. I'm Venus. I'm talking to you right now. I escaped from my mother. Silence on the other end. Then his voice softened. We've confirmed your identity. You're Margaret Wilson, 45 years old. Your daughter, Venus Wilson, died of malnutrition 5 years ago after gastric sleeve surgery. The phone fell from my hand. I rushed to the large mirror in the bedroom, staring at the reflection. Not the youthful face of a 20-year-old girl, but the face showing the signs of age of a middle-aged woman. Memories flooded back like a torrent. I remembered the agonizing feeling of Venus convulsing on the operating table, her eyes wide with indescribable pain. She had died, and I hadn't been able to save my child. I had done everything I could to keep my daughter from dying. I had mummified her, placed her on the bed next to the dolls, and continued life as if nothing had happened. But the nightmare began. I saw Venus every night, standing beside the bed, whispering, "Mom, you can't escape me. You turned me into a doll, and now you're a doll too. We'll be together forever." When the Japanese police arrived at the apartment after the call from the detective, they found me sitting amidst hundreds of dolls, wearing gaudy makeup, the powder pink Lolita dress, my fake blonde hair perfectly styled. As they led me out of the apartment, I turned back. All the dolls had Venus's face, my face. For a moment, I saw Venus standing among them, smiling. I didn't like silence and lonely human. Looking across the dark room, I saw Jack standing on the dresser, his eyes reflecting the faint light from the window. "Jack?" I whispered, but he just silently watched me, as still as a statue. 2 days later, as I was washing dishes, that voice came again.
"I smell you."
I spun around. Jack perched on the back of a chair, his head tilted to one side, his eyes unblinking. "You can talk, Jack?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond, just hopped off the chair and flew towards his cage, as if regretting revealing his secret. That night, a scream tore through the silent air, jolting me awake. It was a woman's scream, desperate and utterly terrified.
"No, no, please."
I stood frozen in the middle of the living room. The scream had come from Jack's cage. I turned on the light. Jack stood there, his head lowered, his feathers raised defensively. He suddenly blurted out a string of words in a drunken man's voice.
Shut up. I'll kill you. Shut up.
Then the woman's scream again, followed by sobbing. The next morning, I called the staff at the rescue center. Helen sighed heavily. "I should have told you sooner. Jack came from a complicated household. The police confiscated him during a domestic violence investigation. The husband killed his wife. And Jack witnessed it all? African Greys can live up to 70 years, and they remember everything. We were hoping that with time, he would forget those memories." 2 days later, as I was working, Jack flew in and landed on my desk. For the first time, he had actively approached me like that. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. He tilted his head, then said,
"Lisa. Scared. Lisa. Scared.
"Who's Lisa?"
Lisa. Dead. Lisa. Dead."
I started searching for information about Lisa's case. According to the news, her husband, Robert, had murdered her in a drunken rage, then committed suicide when the police arrived. The case was closed, but there were many ambiguous details. Lisa's body was found in the basement, even though the argument was said to have occurred in the living room. And the time between the murder and Robert's suicide was almost 24 hours.
"Not Robert. Not Robert.
Jack repeated.
Other man. Other man kill Lisa.
"Jack, you saw who killed Lisa?" I whispered.
Mason. Mason kill Lisa."
I searched through the news articles and found a clue. Lisa's colleague named Mason had been briefly questioned but quickly dismissed as a suspect when Robert confessed. I contacted the detective in charge of the case. Initially, he was skeptical, but when I shared details that only Jack would know, he started to pay attention. I started following Mason, a man who worked at the same insurance company as Lisa. Through social media, I discovered he had recently moved to a new house in Venice Beach, too expensive for a regular insurance employee's salary. That night, I received a text message from an unknown number. Curiosity is a dangerous trait. I tried to contact Detective Ramirez but couldn't. A noise echoed from the back door. Someone was trying to break into my house. I lunged for the phone, but before I could dial 911, a loud crash echoed, the glass shattering. Jack let out a piercing scream and flew to the ceiling. I ran into the bathroom, locked the door, and called 911. The officer said they would arrive in 5 minutes. Footsteps stopped outside the bathroom door.
I didn't intend to hurt you. I just wanted to know what you've discovered.
Mason! I exclaimed in disbelief. Suddenly, Lisa's scream came from Jack's beak, along with Mason's words from that fateful night.
Shut up! You know too much! Damn parrot,
Mason whispered. Without thinking, I flung open the bathroom door and lunged out. Mason was reaching for Jack's cage, a gleaming knife in his hand. No! I screamed and threw myself at him. We crashed to the floor, wrestling for the knife. Mason was much stronger than me, and soon I found myself pinned down, the blade pressed against my throat. In that desperate moment, Jack suddenly swooped across the room and flew straight into Mason's face. His sharp claws and hard beak attacked mercilessly. Mason screamed, releasing his grip on my throat to cover his face. The knife clattered to the floor. Blood flowed from multiple wounds on his face as Jack continued his furious assault, flying around his head like a black whirlwind. Mason roared, swinging his arms wildly. I lunged to the corner of the room, grabbed the lamp. Mason had gotten to his feet, blood streaming down his face, his eyes wild. As he lunged towards me, I swung the lamp with all my might, hitting him in the head. Mason staggered but didn't fall, still advancing. I backed away, hitting the wall, with nowhere left to go. Just then, the wail of police sirens filled the air. Mason's face contorted in rage and desperation. He turned, intending to run out the back door, but Jack swooped down again, his claws tearing at Mason's eyes. Mason screamed in agony, stumbled, and fell, his head hitting the corner of the coffee table with a sickening thud. Police officers rushed in, guns drawn. I slumped to the floor, exhausted and trembling. Jack flew to my shoulder, a feathered comfort. "You're safe now," an officer said. Half an hour later, my house had become a crime scene. Mason was still alive, but severely injured. Detective Ramirez arrived, his face grim as he took my statement. Mason was the beneficiary of a large insurance policy Lisa had taken out, a detail overlooked in the initial investigation. So Robert wasn't the killer? We believe he was murdered, and it was staged as a suicide. When the police officers left, I sat down on the sofa, feeling exhausted, but strangely at peace. Jack flew over, landing beside me. For the first time, he nuzzled his head against my hand, an affectionate gesture he had never shown before. "Thank you," he said in his own voice. Last year, when I was 14 with just a week left of summer break, I was really looking forward to our yearly camping trip with my dad. It was a tradition we'd kept up since I was 7, a chance for us to bond before I got thrown back into the craziness of school. We usually hit up a campsite about 2 hours outside the city. This time was a little different, because we had Rex and Max along for the ride, the 2 Rottweilers Dad had rescued a couple months back. They were both big, built like tanks, and had that serious guard dog vibe. I wasn't totally sure they were cut out for it, but Dad said they needed some room to run wild and stretch their legs. When we turned onto the road heading to the park, I noticed it was weirdly empty. Normally around this time, the place would be packed with families, kids laughing, and the smell of barbecue everywhere. Looked like people just weren't feeling the whole camping thing this year. We didn't really care though. Dad said it'd be even better with more space to chill. Max and Rex were all hyped up to get out of the car. When we got to our usual spot, this flat patch of land next to a little stream, Rex and Max started sniffing around with their ears perked up, letting out little whines every now and then. We set up camp without saying much, the sun dropping fast and darkness settling over the woods. Dad got a fire going, and we roasted some sausages and potatoes for dinner. The air was getting pretty chilly, and I threw on a sweater, not feeling as comfy as I usually did on these trips. While we were packing up dinner, we heard this crackling noise coming from the edge of camp. Both dogs jumped up right away, their fur standing on end. Dad figured it was probably just a deer. He grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the noise, but all we could see were a bunch of tree trunks and bushes. Rex let out a low growl, and Max locked his eyes in the same direction, both of them looking ready for a fight. Then there was another crack, even closer this time. Dad grabbed my wrist and gave it a little squeeze to tell me to stay quiet. He moved the flashlight beam again, and this time I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving through the trees. Dad slowly reached for his belt where he always kept a utility knife. He called out, but there was no answer, just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the fire crackling behind us. We stayed quiet for a few seconds, just staring toward where the noise had come from. Then they showed up. Two tall figures stepped out of the darkness. In the firelight, I could see their faces, both looking rough. One had a beard and the other was bald. Both of them were holding sharp knives in a way that made my stomach drop. The bearded guy started cracking jokes, waving his knife toward our car and talking about how nice it looked and how much he liked all the stuff inside. Dad slowly pulled me behind him. He carefully reached into his pocket, pulled out the car keys, and tossed them onto the ground a few meters away from the guys. "We don't want any trouble. Take them if you want them," he said. And even though I could see his hands shaking, his voice still had this calm, steady edge to it. The bald guy sneered and said he wasn't just after the car, he wanted more. They started edging closer. I felt like I was frozen in place with fear. I couldn't believe this was actually happening. All the years we'd been camping, the worst thing we ever dealt with was maybe a bear sniffing around in the distance. Then everything flipped in a second. A loud bark tore through the air and Rex shot forward. I had no idea if Dad had given the command, or if Rex was just doing what came naturally. The bald guy stumbled back, but Rex lunged again like a rocket, locking onto the guy's wrist so hard that the knife clattered to the ground with a loud clang. His scream tore through the night, Rex's teeth sinking deep into his arm. At the same time, Max went straight for the other guy, slamming into him so hard he flew back and smacked into a nearby tree. Just like that, the whole situation flipped. The two guys shot each other a quick look, and you could see them trying to figure out what to do. The bearded guy muttered something that sounded like an order. They started backing off into the darkness, never taking their eyes off the dogs, who were still growling and ready to tear into them again if they made one wrong move. The bearded guy threw out some threat about coming back, but the way his voice shook made it pretty clear he wasn't feeling as tough as he sounded. Dad kept Rex and Max close for a few more minutes, standing real still and listening for any hint of movement. Once we were sure they were gone, we packed up fast. As soon as we were in the car, Dad fired up the engine and we tore out of there. We couldn't stop glancing out the back window, half expecting those two to come chasing after us. After about half an hour of driving, we pulled into a gas station. Dad went to call the cops while I stayed in the car with Max and Rex, still feeling jumpy about everything that had just gone down. The police showed up about 20 minutes later. They asked us how we got into the park and if we'd passed any barriers or warning signs. I thought back to the drive. There hadn't been any barriers, no signs. The next thing the cop said made Dad and me freeze. He told us the park had actually been shut down for the past 3 months. Nobody was supposed to be there. There'd been a murder, a family camping out had gotten attacked in the middle of the night, and nobody made it out. My stomach twisted up. The image of those two guys with knives still burned into my mind. The killers were still out there, and the case was still wide open. The autopsy report said the murder weapon had been a sharp kitchen knife. Thinking back, We'd missed a lot of red flags when we showed up at that campsite. There were no rangers around, no registration booth at the entrance. The campsites were completely empty, some of them so overgrown it looked like nobody had touched them in months, with weeds taking over the grills and picnic tables. And that bright red triangle sign covering up whatever was underneath. It had definitely been some kind of no-entry warning, but those guys must have messed with it to set up their trap. I glanced over at Dad driving, but neither of us said anything about the signs. It was over, and the only thing that mattered was that we were still okay. We just sat there in silence the whole drive home. Rex and Max were sprawled out in the back seat, picking up on the heavy mood. I reached back and ran my hand over their fur, feeling this huge wave of gratitude for them being there when we needed them most.
Thank you for watching until the end. As mentioned earlier, our goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers in 2026 is still ongoing. If you enjoy these stories, please give us a hand and support us.